12 noon, so that's 12 p.m. We're in the afternoon time, and welcome to Interfaith Intercultural Dialogue. I'm Mujahid Ramadan, your host and moderator of this panel discussion. This is the seventh in a series of discussions that we've hosted here as a partnership with KCEP, and it's been sponsored by our good friends at the Silver Sage Foundation. We encourage and we thank both of them, the station management here and, of course, Silver Sage Foundation, for their continued backing and support in terms of not only the program itself, but even speakers that are involved. Again, I'm Mujahid Ramadan, and you, normally you hear me on Police Promoting Unity every Wednesday from 9:30 to 10. This is somewhat of a different venue, but it's been an exciting one nonetheless. And we've talked about matters from compassion, women in religion, 21st century, and today we have a different subject matter. We have three panelists as we normally do, and again, to remind our listening audience, interfaith dialogue and interfaith and intercultural dialogue really is not about convincing people that one point of view is correct or not. It's really about just sharing our information with one another in a harmonious, compassionate, understanding fashion. It is really to get us to know about one another, and the important thing that goes on there, to be informed about someone else's faith, their cultural perspective, their gender concerns, their political concerns, their social concerns, doesn't mean that you're being converted. It just means that you're even more informed. And I appreciate hearing the comments of General Smiley before the U.S. Congress when he talked about what he read, the fact that he reads communism and socialism, he reads Marx and Lenin and Trotsky and Kwame and Nkrumah. He said it doesn't make him a communist. He just wants to be informed. So again, to our listening audience, to be informed does not mean to be converted. It just means to be more informed, and that's the nature of human beings. We have three guests, as I mentioned to you, that are joining us here in our discussion today. And, of course, the subject matter is spirituality, technology, and Generation Y. And we're going to be speaking this more of a cultural perspective because we're going to be speaking to a cultural generation that are dealing with issues that we find in the forefront of social media, both in positive and negative sense, and that is technology. Joining me today, and I'm honored for them to be here. This is by far, I am the senior elder in this group here in the panel discussion today. I think I am a grandfather. I could be a grandfather to all of them. One of our guests is from the Baha'i community who's been involved in several of our panel discussions, not this one, but other members of Baha'i community. And the first member, I'm going to mention her name here, is Mona Asadi. And Mona is from Chapman University. I'm going to introduce them all and then I'll bring them in. Is from Chapman University, president of Chapman Society of Music, Education, Chapman's Black Student Union Executive Board, member of the Baha'i representatives on the Chapman's Interfaith Council. So Mona is also a member of the Baha'i community locally, but she attends Chapman College University in Southern California. Our next panelist, I know quite well, Kailyn Haye. Just so happens she's my granddaughter. And Kailyn is completed her freshman year, and she's going into her sophomore year in computer engineering and math. She's an incoming sophomore at Virginia State University in Petersburg, Virginia, president scholar, VSU member of the Honor Society. And we're going to double up on these next two panelists because they're going to co-answer questions together. They're sisters. Zeynep Akgedik is a youth council member of Silver Sage Foundation, our sponsoring foundation, a junior at University of Nevada, Las Vegas, majoring in political science. And we welcome her and her sister, Leyla. Leyla is a youth council member also at Silver Sage Foundation. And Leyla, congratulations. You're an incoming freshman, as we understand, to University of Southern California, USC. Welcome all three of you, or four of you in this regards, to Interfaith Intercultural Dialogue, and thank you for taking time out to be a part of this dialogue and discussion. Today, we're drawing our subject matter from, before I bring them in, The subject matter we're discussing, that is spirituality, technology, and Generation Y. We're drawing from a chapter in a book that was edited by Hassan Harcook. It's called Man, God, and Mortality. Man, God, and Mortality. That's by Hassan Harcook. There are 10 different authors in this book, and this book is about the perspectives of Bediüzzaman Said Nursi, who was a 20th century Turkish scholar, one of the most renowned thinkers in theology and philosophy and science and insight into human development. And we've drawn from his concepts on many occasions, and that is the traditional background. Our panelists will be speaking from either their faith traditions or their own personal experiences as students of Generation Y. Welcome you young ladies, you young women, to Interfaith Intercultural Dialogue. Thank you for joining us. So we have our panelists on the line, Mona and the Akgedik sisters. Are you on the line?
Yep, we're here.
Good. And assalamu alaikum to you, Zeynep and Leyla. And welcome and maslama to you, Mona. And it's good to have you back on the program. We've been on Zoom links together dealing with racism and social injustice. And I listened to Sanaya when she was back at Virginia State, involved in a great deal of these. And one of the things, I'm honored the fact that we at Interfaith Council sponsor the Camp Anytown, and she's also a Camp Anytown graduate. One of the questions, ladies, that I didn't send to you, but I want to start with, because, just a little shock effect, since you read the chapter of the book, I hope you eventually read the entire book. But social media has become a venue or a vehicle for people to get to know each other better through different forms of communication within social media. And a positive aspect that I've observed, that the social movement that happened towards social justice while doing, and then it was elevated after the public execution of our brother George Floyd. Your generation was a large portion of the generation that was out there in the protests and the march and the public demonstrations. I was deeply encouraged and overjoyed by your generation's presence in marching and saying that there has to be parity and we have to end the disparity and there has to be social justice. I was more encouraged at the fact that you were a very diverse group. I saw young whites who were from the same generation you're from carrying signs that said, "Mama and Daddy, your silence is getting my black brothers and sisters killed." So they're saying that we are concerned. Has social media heightened the level of sensitivity and compassion for people who don't look like us, who don't think like us, may not even be like us, may not have the financial resources, have less than or more than? So, Mona, I'd like to start with you. It wasn't a question I sent to you, but just from your perspective, being from this generation, has social media really heightened the sensitivity and awareness of the need of the injustices that has gone on in this country for many years but were denied? Was social media a contributing factor to that?
Yes. Thank you for having me here, and great question. I would definitely agree with you and say that social media has had that impact, specifically on my generation. I think with the advent of social media and just a more connected world in general, it's becoming very, very hard to kind of live in your own bubble, own cultural bubble, own family bubble, own state or country bubble. And the world is increasingly connected, and it's hard to avoid it. And this is something that's very unique to our generation and unique to social media. And so I do think social media has kind of, in a way, almost done away with the idea of the other. It's starting to break down that idea of othering and of someone being inherently different from me because they live on the other end of the world, or they speak a different language, or believe in a different religion. Mm-hmm. I think more and more we're starting to see the humanity in others, and I think we are becoming more aware about how other places of the world function and how people live and what their lived experiences are. And I think it's a really great thing, and it does end up helping social movements like that we saw last summer. And I think in general, humanity is kind of uniting in a way through social media. I think it's beautiful.
Yes, and it's all over the world. Zeynep, I'll toss the first question to you in that regard. Your perspective on social media and its impact on affecting social justice and people knowing about the need for social justice and realizing that there is disparity and there are police that are out there that's just violating civil rights and taking the lives of people unjustly. Has social media given us another window to look at that, to open the eyes of people?
Yes, I totally agree with the points that Mona made. And one thing I would like to add is that when looking at the brighter side of social media, we can see that the younger generation is becoming more aware of the traditional, religious, and economic differences of others because they are essentially exposed to such differences on social media platforms. So growing up with this new version of social media and technological culture can make people of Generation Y more open-minded and can help them bring injustices to light. So social media is definitely a solution to fighting injustice and persecution.
So in that regard, that we could just say, okay, it could potentially reduce some of the bias, bigotry, racism, and prejudice that we see in the world, but then specifically in the United States, that's our home, and all of you are going to grow up here and graduate from college here. You're going to pursue your careers here. You're going to have families here, and you're going to lead this nation. Do you think that social media will help bring the barriers down? And I'll give that to Leyla. Do you think those social media is going to help bring those barriers down?
Yes, I think that those barriers can come down with social media because, like Mona said and like my sister said, through social media, people are becoming more aware of the events that are happening around them, and they're more responsive, and they're willing to take risks and fight injustice so that they can bring those barriers down. So I think we can never make sure that social media will do that, but I definitely see people turning towards change and becoming more aware of the things that are surrounding them.
So turning more towards each other instead of on each other. Kailyn, your observation about it, you're at a historical black college.
Yes.
So you all get even another perspective, a window that you're looking through. You've been involved in Cap Intertown. You've been to the UN to speak. What's your observations about social media's positive impact on helping drive social injustice and also to combat bias, bigotry, racism, and prejudice?
I do think it has a major impact. I mean, at least for my generation, we grew up on this. Like, I was in the age where, I was born into a time where Instagram, when it was becoming popular, everyone from my generation kind of jumped onto it, Snapchat, Twitter. And so I think we built this form of empathy with each other by having multiple forms of communication and multiple perspectives given to us all at the same time, that we kind of have no reason to not deny something's happening, to go against someone who's saying this is happening, because virtually I can understand where you're coming from, though I may not be experiencing it, because I know what you're talking about just from having been online with you all this time, having seen what you go through, what you're talking about. So I definitely think it's definitely a forum for social activism to take its place, because it's all available to us at the same time, and we all have this greater connection to it, to where we find value, we find truth in it, and we find these perspectives that definitely give us insight into how other people are living.
And so you all actually, I've seen something that hasn't happened since our generation. I'm a baby boomer. We're the greatest generation that America's ever produced. No applause needed at this point in time. But we actually were engaged in similar, what they call civil disobedience, protests, sit-in, take over college campuses. The Kent State massacre, where the National Guard actually went in and fired on the college students. So we can identify, and some people say the generation that's most like the baby boomer generation will be Generation Y. Now let's broaden the scope of discussion about social media and some of the questions that you all have. One is Generation Y, as a result of social media, less religious or spiritual than previous generation? And is this the result of mechanical technology, i.e. social media? You know, we see documents through the Pew Research that says fewer and fewer young people go to church now. Fewer and fewer young people identify with organized religion now. Some say young people are becoming more spiritual. Some people say that young people are becoming less spiritual and that technology is removing some of their humanity and their social skills. I'll go first with you on this one. Zeynep, your observations about that, social media and its effect on religion and spirituality.
Yes, I believe that Generation Y is both less spiritual and less religious due to the influence of technology and consumerism. In the book, when defining Generation Y, the author says something to the effect of God has become another item for sale in the market of spirituality, which means that Generation Y doesn't have a clear understanding of the divine. Moreover, the idea of divinity has become a material and has lost its value in contemporary society. Adding on to that, because of technology and consumerism, people are so used to having access to tangible objects that they forget how to obtain something as abstract as the concept of spirituality. They might even get impatient because they're so used to getting things instantly. As a result, in a society where materialism prevails, religiosity and spirituality are degraded to second-class citizens.
You know, this relates back to your experience, and I just want to highlight this for a moment. Both Zeynep and Leyla are Turkish, but both of you actually grew up in Pakistan.
Yes.
Am I correct there? And so
yes.
Which is a largely conservative, Orthodox Muslim population. There are a lot of question marks about how women are treated there and how others are treated there. But do you see a difference in the social media's impact on Generation Y in a country like Pakistan versus the United States and or the Western world? Is the social media more compelling and having a bigger impact in our part of the world?
Well, I think that social media is becoming so popular that location isn't a limit to how much people can use social media. For example, like we discussed with the first question, people are becoming more aware of the things happening around them because of social media. And even like sitting here, we can look at our friends' social media in Pakistan and know what they're doing, what they're up to. So I don't think right now or like in the future, the location of where you are will really matter because I'm seeing that like more and more people are having social media and they can just with one click access everything. So location isn't stopping anyone, but I can say that in this part of the world, people are just more open-minded and open to fighting injustice. So that's one difference, but I think in the future that gap will really close. Like it wouldn't matter if you're in Pakistan or here or in Turkey. With access to social media, everyone can know everything instantly. And yes, those are my opinions about this issue.
So Sanaya, your observation, now you come from a both Muslim and Christian background, so you get the holidays, you get the events, you fast the month of Ramadan, you're part of the choir in the church when you're available. Has social media, and then of course you actually would have been educated largely in Christian schools. Has social media dulled the spiritual or the religious value of Generation Y?
For me personally, no, because I think I had an upbringing to where I knew of God before social media had its impact to kind of tell me that I can be my own person without needing an infinite or needing a higher power to help me and to guide me. But I do think for the better majority of Generation Y, they found that it's easier to come to terms with I can provide for myself, I deal with myself, I make myself happy, I can do anything without taking into consideration, what is greater than me. I think we take into account that we don't take into account that we're finite, and this pushes us to push an infinite away a lot of the time. So yes, I think social media has dulled that kind of mentality that we need someone there for us, an infinite, if you will, in our multiple perspectives. And social media has become that kind of infinity for us to kind of divulge ourselves into and to become who we want without regard to kind of any kind of standards or morals or, hard concrete things to kind of put our morals and judgments, not judgments, but morals, bad morals, and kind of ground ourselves on.
Mona, we're getting solid answers. I hope our listening audience is getting the benefit that I'm getting. I'm here in the studio, but I'm hearing from these other students, and I'm gaining greater aspiration or inspiration for Generation Y. I think you guys can do this. You can handle this stuff right here. Mona, your observations about it. You're in the theatrics and the science of talents. Social media has been a good vehicle there, but has it dulled the spiritual and the religious senses of our human population?
I think this is an interesting question, and I think it could go both ways. And I really agree with a lot of what the other panelists said on the topic. I think that social media kind of has infiltrated my generation to the point where it has become kind of something we do in our every waking minute of our life. It's involved in everything that we do. It is weaved into the fabric of our life. And in previous generations, I would say religion would have been something that holds that place. Religion would have been weaved into the fabric of our lives. And so I do think social media has almost kind of dulled the senses for us, and made it so that we're never bored and we never have to contemplate the divine or anything bigger than ourselves or our friends that we see posting. It's very much contained, and we don't really have to challenge ourselves in the same way that maybe previous generations have had to. But at the same time, I do think religion has decreased in my generation, but I don't think that spirituality necessarily has decreased. I think people are starting to realize the corruption and some of the hypocrisies that some different religions might have. And they're starting to kind of get this larger idea of the world and what's out there through social media, through looking things up on Google in a split second. And so people are starting to pick and choose almost their own spiritualities, and they're able to decide, okay, maybe this one thing from this religion really speaks to me, but not this other thing. And so they kind of create a pattern of a framework of their own belief system and can go off of that, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think that people gearing towards spirituality is a good thing, and not giving up on spirituality is a good thing. But yes, I do think religion has declined in recent years. So
now you were having this amen moment to Mona's observation. You want to add to that?
I really do agree with her. It's a pick and choose mentality that I think is prevalent with us. We don't have kind of this kind of traditional way of thinking anymore to say, okay, I subscribe to just Christianity. I could subscribe just to Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam. It's more of pick and choose, cherry picking. I find this suits me. I find that this doesn't suit me. We're leaving social media again. We customize who we want to be without any kind of standard as to say, okay, I know for sure, concrete, down to the fact, this is good. This is 100%. This is okay. But there's nothing to base it on now. It's made it so that we have kind of, I don't want to say it's too many options, but there's no kind of standard towards us right now. This pick and choose mentality, there's nothing grounded in it. There's no kind of solid belief behind it other than that it suits me right now. I'm okay with it, my feelings. But feelings change, hearts change, people change. What is consistent in us? And I think that's where our religion or our spirituality comes from. That's based in kind of a traditional mindset, in a way, to believing again in a higher power rather than, I feel this right now, this is good for me. I can tell myself this, but being in a finite state without having kind of an infinity to look back on and to seek, that seems troublesome, in my opinion.
Okay. Zeynep, I'm hearing your spirit said, I got something to say to this. I need to speak on this. Go ahead and say that. Your observations, Zeynep, in terms of this question. Religion, spirituality, reduction, technology, your observation.
Yeah. I want to add that when people can't obtain, spirituality, they find substitutes to compensate for the dissatisfaction and emptiness that they feel. Sometimes these substitutes can be, as the author of the book points out, loved ones, children, a successful career, fame, power, money, and anything materialistic. As a result, the belief in God gets replaced by worldly matters in Generation Y.
Mm-hmm. And could, to any of you just want to respond to this quickly, could drug and alcohol addiction and even misguided sexual behavior also be a substitute for looking for that internal and eternal rest and peace and divinity? Could they be forms of substitutes also? Anyone?
I definitely think so. These forms take our minds off of the reality of a situation and take us to a place of pleasure, of ecstasy, so we don't have to live in the current and the now and deal with our issues or our problems. They're a poor substitute for sure, because they're a fleeting moment of pleasure, but there's nothing to look onto and to hold once, you've run out of alcohol, you've run out of drugs, your partner doesn't want you anymore. You're still left with that feeling of loneliness, of dissatisfaction, because there's nothing grounded in it. You yourself are not satisfied with the current situation, and you're substituting it with something that is materialistic, that is physical, and not something that kind of feeds your soul, feeds your spirit, the one thing that truly can be satisfied and will leave you feeling a better version of yourself.
So that adage of Christ at the well, when he asked the woman for the water and she said she wouldn't give him a drink, and he said, but if I drink of that, I shall thirst again. But if you drink what I'm drinking, you shall thirst no more. And I think he was pointing to the spirituality. Mona, if you didn't comment on this one, I want to move to the question of, we've talked about this, and I don't think this question is necessarily a repeat, but I've noticed among some populations, our ability to articulate thoughts, our ability to speak, to use the English language. Cursing has become more prevalent in society now. Everything is an MF or BI or N this or that bump, and all the language you all hear. Has this been a result of technology? Have we dummied down? And I'd like for all of you to respond to that. And has it, in that regards, dumbing down heightened the level of violence? Because we've noticed as technology has expanded, the violence in your generation has also gone up. Has technology affected our communication skills? And has it led to poor conflict resolution skills, which has led to greater violence and greater loss of life?
Yes, I would agree. I think that with social media and just the realization that I literally cannot get away from my screen because of school responsibilities, and everything is surrounded around technology now. It's literally a part of my life, and I can't get away from it. And so with that being said, we all have to adapt to this new style of living. We have all had to kind of learn how to express ourselves over the keyboard, oftentimes more frequently than we would having to speak to someone one-on-one. And so I do think communication is lacking in our generation. I don't know if people really understand how to resolve conflicts one-on-one, speaking truthfully with each other about emotions and where they are. I think that's kind of been supplemented with oftentimes passive-aggressive posts or, I don't know, just kind of social media taking a hold and not allowing us to resolve conflicts. And oftentimes, people will actually type very nasty things on the other end of a phone or a laptop and think that what they say has no impact on who receives that message because it's in the ether and it's not being said to their face. What we realize is that those words would never be said to their face. Most people would never say those things because they know that there's a real person standing in front of them and it's physical and they can see them and they can see the hurt on their face. Whereas when they do it over the internet, none of that humanity is reflected back to them. And in regards to your question about violence, I do think that technology might be increasing violence, but I think that is mostly due to the media that is surrounding us nowadays and the TV shows and the video games. Do I think those things are the cause of violence? No. But I do think that individuals who have already violent tendencies or aggressive tendencies are pushed and egged on by these things that they see on TV and in the movies and in video games, and they kind of normalize them. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's my opinion on that.
Mm-hmm. Leyla, in the normalization, could social media then in that regard have dehumanized us and depersonalized us so we don't feel anything for other human beings because we just relate with computers, we just relate with hard, cold technology? Could that affect the person's tendency towards being able to, and along with the video games that Mona has mentioned, that shows nothing but extensive killing and violence and you get big scores for it, hey, that makes it much, much easier. So in this regard, while social media has been a wonderful servant, it's turning out to be a terrible master. Has social media impacted that from your perspective?
Yes, I think the overuse of technology has just reduced our social, emotional, and communication skills because, like someone mentioned, we were born into the age of the internet and technological advancement. So instead of feeling the need to communicate with our friends, our parents, or other people around us, we're perhaps more interested in exploring, say, a new video game or a new movie. So as a result, the increased use of technology led to decreased family time and personal time and decreased social practice, which now is concerning and harmful for society in general. And this relates back to the increased rates of violence in society because in the book, we had read that people have essential needs like belonging, significance, and attachment. So if those are not met, they can direct the attention of individuals to wrong paths and, like we said before, negative substitutes like drugs and alcohol. This then results in a prolonged immersion of oneself in cyberspace, where it's statistically proven that people feel lonely and become more open to self-harm.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You mentioned that disconnect among the parents were the results, the symptoms of this. The author in the book and many of those who cited said that the fact that children very seldom now bond with the parents, and generally, mine is only speculation as a man, children will primarily bond first with the mother. She carries them for 9 months, and their first 2 to 3 years of supervision is directly hers, so they bond with her first. But has technology now become the new vehicle for raising children, and as a result of that, they don't get that social experience, and in that sense, they don't bond, and the lack of bonding then causes them to pursue these alternative avenues of self-fulfillment. What about that, Sanai?
I can definitely see that. Kids are sometimes raised on laptops and iPads in front of them the whole time. So they don't know how to make those facial recognition, those connections to a face, to understand feeling, to understand emotions, and how to be socially intelligent in a situation. A child may be highly intelligent with computers, math, numbers. I'm saying STEM stuff, because at least in my own experience, in my own field, I'm in technology a lot, especially with computers and coding and cybersecurity. And I often notice that when having a conversation with someone in the same field, it's not always as emotionally aware. It's very much so I'm speaking to you as if I'm a robot, or they're speaking to me as if they don't have the emotion behind them to be able to communicate totally how they feel without sort of delving back into this unemotional awareness about themselves. And I think that's because they haven't had the chance to communicate with someone on a deeper level of looking them in the eye and gaining that kind of communication of the nonverbals. So definitely, I think that technology has had an effect on us, even with violence today. It's easier in social media. Everything is so quick and fast, quick responses. We used to say, oh, I'm laughing at this. Now it's like LOL, different like acronyms for things. We want to get out quick responses, be instantaneous right now. But oftentimes we can't communicate our full selves and what we're trying to say if I really want to say something, but just in 5 words. It's different if someone, for instance, in instance what Mona was talking about, someone said something nasty online, could they really have been saying something nasty, but in a response to that, it could be, well, I don't really care about that, in something else short, instead of, hey, let me reach out. This really hurt my feelings for this reason, and I really didn't appreciate that. It takes too long. It's too much to put into like the words that kind of social media has and technology has on us to be able to communicate all of this, because we don't know how. A lot of the times we don't know how to explain our feelings. We don't know how to be able to vocalize our emotions, to communicate with each other. And it leads to these situations where violence is the only option, because we think that's the only way we can communicate to really get our feelings and our points across. In a sad instance, my cousin in the past 3 months was murdered by gang violence because of a post online dealing with some of his friends and items, but it was all a misunderstanding of a post that was taken too far. And I think had they all been more emotionally and socially aware of themselves, to take a step back and say, hey, this is kind of silly, maybe we should talk to each other face to face and understand why we think violence is the only option, when I do think deep in my heart that anything can be resolved through discussion. And like you mentioned earlier, not coming to, I accept everything you say, but I can understand where you're coming from, why you would feel this way, what we can do to coexist with one another. But we haven't learned that, because a computer cannot teach us this. A laptop sitting in front of us all day can't show us this. I can't learn how someone is feeling frustrated from a screen. I can see the expression, mirrored to me in someone making an expression, but it's not natural in the way that it's supposed to be.
Mona, the child who doesn't get to be held by the mother's, lay in the mother's lap, experience those close, warm experiences, may not get to know of its emotions. What kind of human being do we, and then they're exposed to social media, what type of human being are we getting out of that?
I think Kailyn hit it right on the nail. I think the type of human being is a human being that is lacking in social and empathetic faculties. I think, unfortunately, when we aren't surrounding ourselves with real-life people and real-life conversations, we kind of lose our ability as humans to connect to and see the humanity, the love, the divine, the intricate parts of each person's personality and what makes them unique. Those are such important details of all of us that are just kind of thrown to the wayside in the function of technology. We don't get to know those beautiful parts of every single person unless we talk to them face to face and we have these deeper, meaningful conversations. And so a child that does not have the bond with his or her mother, or maybe doesn't have a sibling, maybe they're iPad children, as Kailyn mentioned, they exist, and there are a lot of them nowadays, unfortunately.
Really?
These kids are going to suffer. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I see that people nowadays are starting to realize that iPad children are maybe not the best way to raise your children. But for a few years there, I was seeing many children, you know, if you're at a restaurant or something like that, the kids just have an iPad in front of them. They're not interacting with the family at dinner.
Right.
iPads are given to children nowadays to kind of make sure that they're behaving, they don't make a scene. And it's just unfortunate because that effort, that parenting effort, maybe is not as much there as it used to be. And so, yeah, I think these kids are unfortunately going to grow up with a lot of social issues, and we will see it compound in future generations. But I think on a positive end of things, I do think that more people are coming into an awareness of the effects of technology now, because we've been living with it for so long, and because it really has taken a toll on some of us personally. I think we can learn from personal experience now. It's not as new, it's not as novel, we're not as haphazard with it. And so hopefully in the future, future parents won't put an iPad in front of their child every time they make a scene, and will actually put in the effort to teach them right from wrong, and hopefully give them those social interactions that they need so much at that age.
I'm thanking all of you for your observations. And could you throw in there also, they don't have to change the applications on the phone all the time. In my generation, being a baby boomer, I like for the phone to stay the same for a while. Because, you know, every few months I'm getting a new application. I have to relearn the phone, and then heaven forbid, you have to get a new phone. Now you got to go back through the whole process all over again. I didn't get into the use of technology to become technological. I got into use for just a use benefit, but it is becoming so as you all pursue this ideas leading down the line, because you all can change it also for us. So we can conclude that bonding is very important, and that I'm seeing a rise in both ethnic populations, in particular among people of color, where there's an increase, actually no, across the board, it's just not people of color. Because where we see active shooters in the Caucasian white community, we see outright gang violence in the black community. And in each population group, in each ethnic group, most of the homicides are committed by people who look like the people who they shoot and kill. So obvious, the behavior is the same, taking lives, but they're coming from a different cultural perspective. One may go in with, now everybody has semi-automatic weapons, and shoot up a school of elementary kids, and another one may do a drive-by at a house party and shoot at some young kids and kill them there. And of course they grow up on social media playing games where you shoot people at, not taking in consideration it's not a game, it's a life, and social media impacts that. So certainly not feeling for my fellow human beings. And Christ Jesus, peace be upon him, said, and love your neighbor as yourself. But instead of loving our neighbor, we tend to be hating our neighbor. Interestingly enough, you're all four females on the panel here, and I'm not sure we just had access to males, and I'm sure there are males that are out there. But has social media had a different impact on the female population in your generation and on the male population? Have you seen more of an impact, positive or negative, in either generation? Because I remember receiving a advertisement from Virginia State University, Kailyn, where all of the students of the year, including yourself, freshman of the year, sophomore of the year, junior of the year, senior of the year, they were all females. And I'm finding women really taking on roles. Has technology affected those situations of where genders fall out at? Has it had more of a positive impact on the feminine gender than on the masculine gender? Let me go back to you, Zeynep.
Yeah, I think women are more affected by social media platforms because of the beauty standards that are set forth by, celebrities or models. So women tend to easily fall into the trap of comparing their, physical appearances to other women. So I think it definitely does affect women more than men. Yeah.
So women are being objectified.
Yes.
And now you grew up in Pakistan. That's a very conservative and, Orthodox Islamic environment with actually some extremes, because we have, the murder of women there for just these unknown standards that they call religious but really aren't. Has that form of social media had effects in countries like Pakistan? The objectification of women as sexual objects.
I think it is more prevalent in the Western world. I wouldn't say it is more common in Pakistan, because, Pakistan is, I believe, 99% Muslim. Mm-hmm. So we believe in religious principles, and Pakistani people, they try to at least practice their religion. So I don't think women are more objectified in Pakistan, but definitely more in the Western culture. But still, objectification is present everywhere around the world, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And women don't realize this. They say that they have freedom to show their bodies and do anything with it, but they don't realize that they're being used by the industries, by companies and corporations, this materialistic society, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Good, Anne. Thank you for that. We talked about this for a moment, but I want to go back to it again and get clarity on it. Generation-wide technology and consumerism, because now you have access to Amazon and many other vehicles and platforms for purchasing. You can shape your buying. Has technology now led to us being more selfish, more self-driven towards individualism and consumerism, and we want everything now? We want it microwave, we want it quick, we want it now. What role has technology played, or has it played a role in that? Let's go, Mona.
Oh, absolutely. I think my generation lives in a world of, I want it now, so I'm going to get it now. And Amazon, as you mentioned, has made that so easy. Absolutely so easy. So I do think that we kind of have this sense of entitlement, almost. Entitlement to comfort, entitlement to material goods. And in terms of being more self-centered and individualistic, absolutely. I do think we kind of live in a world now where we can almost do what we want to the point of harming someone. So people say, do whatever makes you happy, just make sure you don't hurt anyone as you do it. And that's kind of the standard. And so that allows us to throw a lot of morals out the window in a search for an inner material fulfillment, an external material fulfillment that we probably won't get from materialism, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And that actually comes from the spirit. But in terms of selfishness, I think it could be argued both ways. I do think that we become more selfish for the reasons that I stated before. But at the same time, I do think that social media has made us aware of people living in different situations, people living in poverty, people living under the fist of oppression. And so, in a way, I do think social media has made us more empathetic to those things and more willing to help other people in that way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I want to go back to, let's see, we had another question here. In your generation, conflict resolution, if our abilities to communicate has dropped off, we can't communicate well, we speak in broken words, profanity has become a part of the general lexicon of discussion. In media, you hear athletes and people using profanity more openly now. Does that filter into the general population? And how does it affect young children when they grow up and they hear people using profanity and cursing as a way of expressing themselves? How does that affect them? Kailyn?
I think it has a major effect on kind of their developmental stages and being able to know how to accurately express themselves again. If you're raised with profanity in your mind all the time, you don't know how to tell someone you're feeling angry. You don't know how to say to someone you're sad. I feel like effed up. I feel, as space. You don't know how to accurately express how you're feeling. And that can lead to a lot of situations where you're in a situation where you need to tell someone exactly, I guess, how to accurately express yourself. And I guess more so profanity and only being able to communicate with these few words, it limits you, really.
Mm-hmm. Leyla, has technology increased the amount of bullying? It was mentioned earlier you can say things, the people aren't there, and you all mentioned the fact that you don't get to see their hurt feelings and things like that, which sometimes through the mirror neurons of the brain we would get that right there. And of course there's this other thing about some people don't take kindly to being talked crazy or bad to. Like in my generation, if you talk to a person like that, you're going to have to face me later on about it, and it's just not going to be a pleasant situation. It wasn't to the degree that it is now. I was working with some brothers in the Nation of Islam on some programs on the street dealing with young men who were having gang violence, and they brought it to my attention that these young boys, as a result of technology and the quote-unquote dummying down, they don't even know how to, and they don't even know what conflict resolution is. And so if there's an issue, and the way they communicate with each other, the smallest thing could be considered, I'm not sure you guys know about this word, being dissed. I kind of get the impression it's the way the person looks at you. They don't know how to get around that right there. So that type of thing can lead to not just a fight, but to a shooting. Has technology removed our ability to be human? And of course, Leyla, you're the freshman in the group right here. You're attending USC. In the general population close in proximity around USC, there is a lot of gang violence with less reconciliation. Could this also be a result of technology?
I think technology has its contributions to this problem because, like you said, because of social media and not seeing the person or not knowing the person that you're interacting with, stops people from learning how to resolve their issues face to face. And I think Kailyn said this, but like people say something, but the other person who is taking the blame is not learning how to say, oh, you hurt my feelings there. I did not like the way you responded to me, or I did not like the way you reacted to my opinion. So definitely gang violence or violence in general has increased because of the increase in social media skills or technology skills. Like one example I can think of is when people are playing video games, like I watch my friends play video games, and constantly they have their headphones in and they're constantly either cussing at someone or telling them they made a mistake, and they're just naming them names. So I think just like social media being a daily practice in our lives, in the lives of Generation Y, is also kind of flowing into their normal day-to-day life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. We have 5 minutes left, and I do want to share some other information with our audience before we depart. But one matter came up, and I'm focusing primarily, and I want to filter it around. There was an event last week, I read about it online, in Turkey, where the Turkish government has withdrawn itself from a commission in the European Union that provides greater protection for women and women's rights. So one, Zeynep and Leyla, Has Turkey fallen into a dictatorship, and has women's rights been further violated and or less protected as a result of this decision, which the Turkish government under Erdogan has been largely criticized and condemned by the United States government, the European Union, and most Western powers? Has that removal of Turkey from that conference affected detrimentally the rights and the protections of women?
Yes, definitely. Turkey has turned into a dictatorship since, 2016. Since the coup attempt in 2016, everything in Turkey has changed. Human rights are no longer respected or protected. Numerous people have been jailed without any, reason. They are not even taken into trials. They don't even have access to lawyers, and they're just being put in jails and prisons. Instead of building schools, hospitals, facilities that help citizens, the Turkish government is building prisons. Thousands of prisons, unfortunately. And it's not only women who are being, persecuted and killed, hurt. It's everyone. Men, women, even children.
Mm-hmm.
The situation in Turkey is so awful right now, unfortunately, and people are not being protected by the government.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the government seems to be the culprit in attacking the people. Mona, through social media and the availability and access of information, should Generation Y be actively engaged in protesting and at least voicing their concern about those type of atrocities and how women, because you're all women on this panel, should there be, Dr. Martin Luther King said, an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So the violation of the rights of women in Turkey really will affect the rights of women in this country. Should Generation Y be engaged in doing things to combat this?
Absolutely. I think that if we are gearing towards the ideal of world unity, which is definitely a Baha'i concept I believe in, then we can't let any person, even in the most remote places of the world, any person that is feeling oppression, go unnoticed. Every life is so valuable. Every lived experience is so important, and it's really important for our generation, and I think it is happening.